Yeah, I don't have questions. I have a question for the three gentlemen that just joined. That we already have the question there. That who owns the coaching process? So, if in about 2 minutes, Max, you could share your view, given your the context that you work in. That what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, thank you for the question, and thank you for being part of this session. So I work across all sports, from little kids to national teams and professional teams, and I have noticed across all those levels that the athletes like Emma, and she shared, the best athletes take ownership. It's not a question. They take it. They take ownership. They want it. So for those athletes, you really don't have to worry about it. But for the others who maybe don't take it or have the confidence to take it, you have to provide them with opportunities and confidence. So a lot of this to me comes back to confidence. As an athlete, do you have confidence to take? So even if I give you ownership, if you don't have the confidence to take it, it doesn't matter. You won't take it. So you have to create environments where you help your athletes believe that they can take the ownership, that they can do it. So a lot of it for me comes back to belief and confidence. And then again, for the Emmas of the world, those athletes, you don't have to worry about it. They're going to take it anyways. So for the other ones, creating an environment where they believe they can take ownership, and they eventually will want to accept that ownership.
I would, am I on? Okay. I would agree completely with what Wade said. I think the material that was presented was great. I know just in listening to it, and going through some of my thoughts, okay, you look at the material and now you have to apply it. And Wade just touched on some of my experience. And one team, a U17, U18 team I had with the U.S., we had Matthew Tkachuk, Austin Matthews, Zach Werenski, and a bunch of other elite NHL players now on this one team. Each guy needed something different from us as coaches. With the end goal of us as coaches, by the end of the season, by the U18 World Championships, we want to open the door and tell them who's up next. We need them to assume all leadership from that point, take all initiative from that point. So it was looking at Matthew Tkachuk and saying, okay, what does he need now? When I was, the past 2 years ago, I entered the Chicago Blackhawks locker room. It's new to me as an assistant coach, and we have Alex DeBrincat, who's now a star in the NHL, but he was a younger player in awe of Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews in that locker room. So he's going to need something different to gain that confidence within that peer group, as Wade said, and as these guys outlined as a coach, I thought the outlines were incredible. I could relate to them through the situations I've been in, and now the practicality of it is that individual attention and assessment of each player, and keeping that end goal in mind. Again, for me, just a visual. It's, hey, when I go to the end of the year, it's changing lines and opening the door for the guys. I don't win or lose a game. It's going to come down to them. So finding a way to empower them to become that. And again, I thought the outlines and the presentations were great in regard to that.
Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks, Wade, because you gave great answers. The answer is quite simple, because there would be no coaches without the players. There would be no coaches without the athletes. So the athletes and players own the process. And I think the main reason why, for example, I'm coaching is that I don't really know myself, but I'm also able to learn something from my players, from my athletes. And thanks, Emma, what you said in your presentation. I was actually listening, not sleeping, although you was teasing me that I was sleeping. But yeah, the greatest thing for me as a coach is that I might be an expert in some area, maybe in fitness or physical development or something else. But in the end, the greatest thing in coaching is that you actually learn something from the players. And Dan Lacroix said greatly that in the morning that it's the greatest feeling when you have smarter people around you than you actually are yourself. And it's the two-way street, like the Uffe said, that's the greatest thing in the hockey or in the sport, that you always meet people, you always get some new ideas, and you share information, and that way you both grow up and get better person.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. I think it was a good warm-up, an introduction to the bigger group. I noticed, and my experience also working in different cultures, this is really still a difficult topic in hockey community, because coaches are always, they are burdened with their old habits and this whole process. What does it really mean to individualize? So we were discussing a little bit these concrete tools, individual development planning process, individual development plans. So from your own experience, all of you, how do you see that process going? What do you include in the individual development plans? How do you build it? How do you define the objectives? What type of things are included? How often you revisit the process? And this is something that sort of could help sort of put it into practical context, this whole issue.
Yeah, and starting answer that question, it's again about the needs for different players. I'm going to give an example from 2 years ago when I came in Södertälje. I had Niklas Grossman, born in 1985, and with 10 years in the NHL behind him. And on the other hand, I had a guy, Hugo Gustafsson, born in 2000. Definitely different needs for both of them. But for Niklas, it was of course a big contrast with this setting up this individual development plan. But he really liked it, and yeah, it worked, and he liked to develop every day. And the tools, like we have said, I think to be able to follow it up all the time, and both with the video clips, of course, and on the ice, on the practices, and talking about it as well, and also letting the players help each other a little bit with their developing points. I think that's a good thing too.
I'm working with a national team right now, and they developed what they call a gold medal profile. So, and I've seen variations of this with lots of different teams, but start with the end in mind. So it'd be like doing a puzzle, right? If you're building a puzzle, you need to see what the picture will eventually look like. So what are we trying to look like, whether it's this year, 5 years out down the road? So they developed what they call the gold, they're an Olympic team, a national team, they developed a gold medal profile. So this is what a gold medalist looks like on all these different metrics: work ethic, attitude, training habits, performance standards, metrics. And then we get busy working towards that. And then how often do you check in on that? It depends on the athlete. Some athletes will want data all the time. Others want more of a general picture of where they're at. But another World Cup championship coach shared with me, he said, listen, Wade, people do what you inspect, not what you expect. And that's always stuck with me, because we have all these expectations of what we want our athletes to do. We expect them to show up on time. We expect them to work hard. We expect them to care like we do. But unless you're measuring those things, most people won't do that, because we're designed to seek out comfort. That's in our biology. We seek out comfort, the path of least resistance. What can I get away with? So that always stuck with me. And he's won 22 national championships, World Cup in soccer. So people do what you inspect, not what you expect. So unless you're measuring it, unless you're measuring these things, you're just hoping that they do it. So data matters.
Yeah, we are. You are allowed to ask questions as well. So, if we finish this round, so short comments on this question about the individual planning process. Or was it any? Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly. I was going to say the exact same thing, that you have to have the big picture there. I would not have been able to. The puzzle was a very good example, actually. But I think also it evolves. Once you do your first plan, you might need to visit it more often. And once you start learning that these are the things that you have to figure out the things that what I need to improve on. And then you kind of need to maybe follow up more often, weekly, bi-weekly, something that you notice that this time I did not do the things that I wanted to do, and then kind of like see why it didn't happen. And then kind of once you start getting used to certain things, then you don't have to revisit it that often, but just kind of evolving.
The other thing that comes to mind is I notice with the better coaches now, they treat, and with their athletes, everything you do is a performance. Everything you do is a performance. The team meeting is a performance. The bus ride's a performance. The practice is a performance. So we start to think more about winning all the moments. So I'll ask a coach, a hockey coach, phone me up. Yeah, we had a team meeting and a road trip. So did you win your meeting? What do you mean? Well, that's an important part of building your team. It's an important part of development. How do you measure if you won your team meeting? If you won a practice, you walk off the ice. Yeah, great practice. Why? Did you win practice today? Oh, I think it went well. No. Did you win practice? How will you know? So you have to develop metrics and ways of measuring your performance, because every time you coach is a performance. And the same thing with your athletes. If you can develop those habits, every training session is a performance. How will you know if you won training today?
And also the way it said that everything is performance, everything else is that you need to see some scores or something else. Nowadays we talk about a lot about technology. There's videos. There's how do you sleep, how do you eat, all kind of stuff you can follow up, and something I'm also going to talk about tomorrow. But the main thing I think it's nice that we have performance. It's nice we are building up the people. But I think the greatest thing in the technology nowadays is that we actually find a person. When we go watch film together with the player, we can start talking, and maybe we talk about some power play 3 minutes, but then we might talk about life 10 minutes, and then you build up relationship, and that's something bigger than actually you find the inner motivation, you find the real way, and that's the biggest thing in coaching, that you need to have tools that helps you to find the person inside of the real inside of the person.
Let's not allow Tommy to get away that easy. So you are a specialist in know maybe exercise physiology a bit better than some of the players and so on. So where do you find that balance of giving them ownership on how they would like to proceed versus you know it better and you have to jump in and say, have you thought about this, or actually tell them that, no, this is what you do?
It's a good question, because it's very individual, because you have a young player, you have this like Emma when she was 70 years old, and the coach came and told me that this plan and you should follow this and do this. And then you have Emma, who is 30 years old, and she knows what to do, and she had a plan and she had a life also outside of the rink. So it's completely different when you have background and you know what works for you and what not. I think it's very individual question, and you have to find like the way how the person. It's all about finding the person, because it doesn't matter how good is your plan. It's about how good you execute it. It's not a saying that 24/7. That's just how it is, because everything involves everything. You might have the perfect plan on the paper, but then you don't sleep, you don't eat right, and then you miss something on the next session or something else. So you have to find the balance of the player or athlete, that how ready she is, how able she or he is able to take care of his everyday routine, everyday life. And some people you have to go hand in hand. You have to go to the store, so see what they are buying in the store, what kind of food they're making. And some players you can give you a lot of responsibility and a lot of things. For example, back in the day when I was Formula 1 with Sebastian Vettel, that was completely the opposite. I had an athlete who was doing everything like all precise, everything, trying to influence everything. So sometimes it's just also getting out of the pressure and just relax a bit. So there's two-way street, and you have to find the individual understanding of the player to get the best out of it.
Hi Wade, my name's Mark Such from assistant coach from Linz hockey team, and you caught my attention with that description of how athletes and just humans in general tend to find the comfort zone or want to take the path with less resistance. And there's sometimes the theory that a player, when he's comfortable in his environment and his surroundings, that his talents will flourish. And then I've also heard, if you listen to Babcock talk at times, he never wants a player to be comfortable. He wants them out of their comfort zone all the time, pushing them to their limits. So I think with the millennials nowadays, you have to communicate a lot. I don't think the word babying them maybe is right, but you do have to communicate and guide them. Where do you find the balance in getting them out of their comfort zone, or leaving them or providing them with a real comfortable situation, so that those two dynamics, how do you find that balance between them?
My experience in looking at research on human behavior and human development, they need to be comfortable with you, but not with their training. I'm not aware of any organism that grows without disruption. So, but they need to be comfortable with that disruption in a sense, right? So that's why I think they need to be comfortable with you and their teammates, their peers, because what you're asking them to do is going to be uncomfortable, maybe unprecedented in some cases, things they've never done or never thought they could do. So really, the job of a coach is to get people to do things they don't think they can do. And so you have to see them for what they can become and get them to believe that they can become that too. So the comfort is with you, the trust, not with the training. The training is going to be very uncomfortable. But if I don't trust you, you're going to lose me.
Did anybody else want to add to it? Okay, I'll.
If, perhaps
Next
it's
poll.
or if we look at these questions, so you can see really, I think what the assumption was, that it's not really happening. We heard the example from Scandinavia, and then we were sort of discussing that it really sort of there's the requirement to try and optimize the potential in each and every athlete, because there's not that many, and it's kind of a typical already nowadays. So how do you find, just short round from all of you, so where do you find time? How do you do this? When do you do this? And what does it really mean if you think about these individual plans? Because it really, based on the answers, seems that it's not yet systematic tool or process in terms of the organizations that we have now involved.
Just talking about finding time and energy, and I think the shoulder to shoulder talks, the small talks on the airport or on the way to the bus or when coming, talk and walk, walk and talk, could be good things when you're sitting on the opposite side of a table with a player, and it gets really stiff, and we can hear it's all about trust and for the player to see the coach as a person as well. So that's my experience, to try to find those small spots of time and use them.
Just maybe to the time thing, I just kind of find out that in the beginning it's going to take a lot of time, but once you are able to put that in place and start taking care of it like in small pieces after, it might, I don't know, at least in the women's teams that I've been on, it actually may make many things easier in the future, because then you actually have a more clear path and you're not making that many wrong ways.
Don, how do you find it, especially with your experience from NHL and then also again the US national development program? So probably it's different worlds.
A little bit of what Ophi said. For me, it's you can be formal at the start of a season. I chose not to. I would be more formal with my group, and then with the staff, assess each individual as an individual, and establish targets for them as a staff, impressions we may want to make on them, and then it's a process. When that season starts for me, I want these guys to be predators. I don't want them, the formalities and the I don't want to over meeting them and over structure, pull them out of their element. So for me, to give them targets incrementally, expectations, what we expect of them, each day in an informal setting, sitting here lounging and talking to a guy, just to keep them in predator mode, comfortable around you, and with a next target, I found is, when you're with a team, that's going to add up if you're doing the work. But very important to me, I would always include my staff, and the meetings would be very formal with our staff in the sense of we'd go through each player, regularly every week or two, and say, okay, where's this player at, mentally, physically, where do we have him at, where can we get him tomorrow, a week from now, 2 weeks from now? How about our long term? Example, a couple of the guys I mentioned, the first year of our U17 year, I would not play Matthew Tkachuk with Austin Matthews for reasons, and we talked about it as a staff, and I thought that's going to be a tandem, probably our U18 year, and they were obviously incredible for us, but it wasn't a fit, and we discussed why it wasn't a fit with each one of those players at that point, and we need to get them to that point because their skill set we felt would be dynamic together. They weren't ready, so we didn't want to do that initially, and we targeted. But again, when we targeted it, it wasn't it was very informal, but we were pushing them a certain direction.
Just adding to that, I think sometimes we get stuck on using technology because it's available. And someone shared with me one time, sometimes it's like using a bazooka to kill a mosquito. Like, we have all this technology, so let's find a way to use it. And it's just a tool. So be aware of it and use it when it's relevant. But I always encourage coaches to use the least amount of intervention and information that will help you get to where you and your players want to get. So ask yourself, so all these things I can do, and all these tools and checks and daily meetings, and what's the least amount of time and energy and tools that I could use to get where we need to get to? And think more in terms of zones. There's something in psychology referred to as the zone of proximal development. But the idea is players are I want to see trends, right? So think of zones of development as opposed to hitting certain targets, certain points along that path. So if we're in the zone, that's fine. Honestly, I don't care where you are in that zone. So what's acceptable zone of development for us right now for each individual player? And if you're in the zone, great, keep going. It's when you're outside of that acceptable zone, that's when we need to maybe have a little bit more interaction and one-on-one. But otherwise, get out of the way. Leave them alone. Let them keep going.
Yeah, I think Don said it quite well, that the good thing in hockey is that we have big coaching staffs. We have people, and it all comes about the leadership, because if you do everything yourself, you have no time. But the biggest thing is that in the club where I'm now, we start every week going through the players. If we have noticed something, if we have seen any problems, everything else, something else, and then we can put the responsibilities. I think that's the main thing almost for the head coach, that he will put the players that maybe they ask some player that looks like this guy is mentally tired. Tommy, could you talk with him when you go in the gym, or do you have to do some changes, or maybe even be involved in massage therapist, that because you cannot hide when you're on the table or something something like that. That's the thing, that if we do development plans together and we're all in the same page and we go through them as a staff, then it's so much easier to go with the players, and then the players notice that we notice them, and then it becomes much more easier to find the two-way street, and they start to talk, and And that's a big way. You said about Mike Babcock that he wants to be a bit uncomfy, that the team is a bit uncomfy, but at the same time there might be some guys who make them comfy, and it's all about the balance. It's all about the scale to put them together. That because always also you need somebody to look up into and somebody who makes the hard choices. So also you need to have the uncomfy side, but at the same time you had to have people who are giving the hand and helping out, and then it's about the process getting better and better.
Yeah. So that already popped up a couple of times, like leave him alone or don't overmeet him or so on and so on. Do you actually have practical examples? I mean, we have to mention Kimi Räikkönen here. You had the Formula One clip and you worked in Formula Ones, and where he said to the team radio that leave me alone, I know what I'm doing. So have you had experiences, maybe you as a player or you guys as players or coaches, where a player goes, hey, that's too much, back off, I know what I'm doing?
This relates probably a little bit to one question we have from the audience, that how tough you should be if you work with younger players. So perhaps you can touch this a bit. So under 16 and all speakers are asked to comment on this.
If I start, I think that you cannot be afraid of being tough, because there are going to be situations it might be tough in the beginning, but like you must be tough to direct in the right direction. If they're not, you have to do it the right way, kind of, but not being afraid of being tough.
Did you have an occasion when you were playing that you felt that the coach could back off a bit? Were you being overcoached?
Yeah, I did. And then I also, especially when I was younger, I thought that now that the coach has to back off, I know what I'm doing, which I didn't. So I think I'm happy that they didn't back off at that time.
I think my experience is well, obviously watch the body language. I mean, that's going to be a dead giveaway for you. From the coaching side, you're going to see when the player feels like you're throwing too much at him. But if I think through situations and players, there are some players where and you could put it in the category of overcoach because they need it. They need you to push them and kick them. And it's the moment you got their attention, which will be a body language thing, you got their attention. You don't have to kick them anymore. You know, I can think of a real quick scenario at World Championships. Some prolific players, and they went in on a 3-on-1, and it was pass, miss. And the game was a close game at that point. It was second period. And they came back to the bench. Of course, they know they made a mistake, but I needed them to know that that's not acceptable. We're not playing pond hockey right now. Finish it. And I knew the players, and I knew the way they would respond. So it was to a point where, okay, I knew I had to say something just enough to get their attention, to pull them out of their little game, and realize I'm going to demand something of them. And I remember walking down the assistant coach and saying, watch these guys next time they go on the ice. And they scored right away because they could do it. You know, I put them out then against the fourth line or third line, and it was bam right away. So I think you're always watching for the cues of, okay, because we have to coach, and as I've said earlier, you want to coach as little as you possibly can. It's all about tact. So you're watching for those cues all the time.
I mentioned the importance of the two-way street when it comes to feedback, and that also includes for me to get feedback from the players. It isn't that easy, and it's different phases and so on. But a few times I've got the feedback to back off a little bit, but more times I've felt it myself to back off and trusting the process a little bit more. And I had, I see Olaf is here. I had Nikolai Meyer this season, Meyer. And he was that kind of fantastic player. it's 60 plus points for us this season. But there I could really feel when I'm going to back off. Now he's got to do his nice paintings himself.
Yeah, I think that's a good example because the process. I think you can never leave it alone because you have to be like there and everything else. But the thing that we coaches meant to do, and that was my biggest mistake when I was a young coach. Okay, I'm still not that old, but because I was like the guy in the golf example this morning. I was trying to fix all the 1,000 biomechanical things and everything else at the same time, and giving all the feedback to the player or the athlete, and throwing everything out of what I knew about something. And the biggest thing I found in the coaching is that giving time to players to know that you are there, and you have to have a system to follow up, but you just lead the process. And when you're there, they start to talk, and then it's much easier to get the two-way street talking and everything else on the way. And I think that's the biggest thing in coaching, know that when you talk, like when to talk and when to be silent and when to just follow and when to watch. That's the biggest thing in coaching, and that's the most hardest thing, because that's the thing, you cannot give everything what you know. It doesn't work that way, coaching.
I think Don hit on it with the idea of timing. Timing's everything in coaching, everything. So being able to read, we talked earlier today about athletes reading situations. So as a coach, being able to read your athletes and your situations. And I always encourage coaches to, when in doubt, pause. You don't have to act. Take notes. You can act on it later, but there may be moments in certain situations where you need to intervene right now. You do need to act right now. And in those situations, you need to be decisive. The best coaches I've been around, this is something I've really noticed just in the last probably 6 months, 8 months, going around the world. The best coaches are decisive. So Coach John Wooden at UCLA, one of the best coaches of all time. I worked at UCLA. I'll talk more about him tomorrow, but he had one of his sayings was, be quick but don't hurry. Be quick but don't hurry. And when you think about it, there is a moment where you need to act, but don't rush. So take notes, pause, reflect, take a deep breath, whatever it might be. And if you still feel like I need to act right now, then act. Be decisive. Do it. And your players will respect that. Players respect decisive coaches. Right or wrong, you acted when you felt that I needed to act right now. I'll give you an example. I coach Pee Wee team, 11 and 12-year-olds. And, of course, the younger the kid and the less skilled they are, the more they think they know and the better they think they are, right? So one situation in a game, kids, I'm on the bench, kid comes off, they're not looking at me, right? They're looking out at the game, so you're talking to the back of their head, and they're just not listening. They don't want to listen. And in some of those moments, you know the kid's just, okay, it's not that big a deal right now. I'll talk to him after the game or practice. Other times, you know this is going to impact that kid throughout the whole game, and he needs to know right now. And turn around, look at me. You're not going on until you know. So you need to be decisive. I think the key is timing, but then be decisive.
Perhaps to wait, there's one question that might be for tomorrow's presentation, but do you know any website with research about this topic? So I think you can probably pull some references to your presentation tomorrow, so for people to search more into this topic. So I think you probably have plenty ideas there.
There's one I'll just throw out now. It's based in the United States. It's called What Drives Winning. And they have a lot of videos, short videos with championship coaches, more at the college and pro level. But there's actually a book by the same title. But I like it. There's little 4 or 5 minute videos from great coaches talking about all different topics, and it's called What Drives Winning. What Drives Winning.
So while we are waiting the answers to come in, so who would like to comment? There was also a question from the audience that when you have strong personalities in the team, that okay, how tough you can be. So how to manage with those kind of strong personalities at the daily level? From your experience, what would you advise?
And can I add to that? So often when we talk about athlete-centered coaching, also based on the feedback from last symposium, I do think quite a few people go, oh, this is this hippie bullshit, flowers, so on and so on. But certainly part of the athlete-centered coaching is to know that which ones are the ones that you need to kick their butt, right? But do you get into these situations on that note that you basically have on the bench, you have that guy who needs to be yelled at, and then you have that other guy next to him that really doesn't, and it just ends up being awkward because you're in this team environment and pulling individuals and kicking him in the ass while you're patting his back? Did that make any sense, the question?
Let me just take a stab at it then. No,
Yeah, I can read from your body language.
I think thoughts come to mind clearly when you mention that. You know, there's different types of players that might fit in that category. Some players are very demanding of their coaches. You know, even when another guy makes a mistake, they're like, you know, they want you to. Every player wants you to hold everyone else accountable, but not themselves. Typically, that's what you run into. Yes, I'm not sure I understood your question specifically. I might be going off topic a little bit, but players that are more challenging.
Yeah, the question was about especially strong personalities.
Strong
so how to deal,
personalities,
strong
Yeah, and
personalities, how to deal with those on the daily basis.
Yeah,
I
my
think-
long ad was that because you're going to have a variety of personalities. So
My experience is you're going to have to deal with them. I mean, you're absolutely going to have to deal with them, and they're going to need some special attention. But you're also going to have to. Your group has to be aware that you are dealing with it. You know, if I have a guy that's got a strong personality and he shows it in the middle of a game, and if he's on the power play, he might not be on the power play the next time out because he's overstepped. He doesn't have his emotions in control. He doesn't have the best interests of his team or reading the situation. So you're going to work with him that way, but you're going to grab his attention immediately. And then you may not be able to work with him until after the game on it. But it has to be addressed, and you can't snap your fingers and fix it. You know, a lot of times those players, in my experience, have pressure on them that you should also understand. You know, outside influences that are putting pressure on him that you're just seeing him not being able to handle that outside pressure. You know.
yeah,
And
on
that
that,
might be part of
you
that.
said of the 3-on-1 attack and pass, miss. You needed to kick all of their butts so that they know.
I just needed to know that.
What if you had two strong personalities and one really completely different personality on the same line? Do you go kick two butts and the last one you go, it'll be okay?
Situational, no question. And in that situation, I took into account those three players could handle in that moment. And again, if we were playing Russia that game, who in that tournament was a high-end talent top team, it might have been a little different. We were playing a very inferior opponent. That came into play too, with how I said it and how I presented it. Because I don't want to kick a guy in a situation where there's a 30% chance he can rise. I kicked them knowing there's like an 85% chance they can rise. And that was a situational decision by me. And then to help it, I made sure they weren't going out against the top defensive pair, you know, to give them a better opportunity. They didn't know that. But I helped them stick it right back in my face because I wanted them to. But, you know, so again, that was a situational. We didn't have a bad guy on that team, you know, but we had selfish guys on that team. These three guys were not selfish guys. And the selfish guys are, you know, there's deviant guys too, and there's selfish guys. But again, I think that the big key to me in working with those players was also at least having some respect to understand pressures that they're under outside of your locker room. That I've found through experience. If you can get to that and help them with that, like there's a reason they're reacting, because in their world, this is a panic situation. What is their world? And when you start finding out about their world, now you're getting to the root of maybe your problem. And you can turn that guy into buying in to what's going on here. But help him feel comfortable with pressure he's feeling. It might be just perceived pressure. It might be actual, but you should find that out.
Perhaps, yeah, please.
Yeah, just for that, if you have to react on them, I think one key thing is that you have to show to the other players that there's not special treatment for a person when it's starting to bother the rest of the players. Then that's something that you have to show them that you're acting to, just kind of making sure that it's staying in the limit of the rules of the team.
Yeah, that's a good way to say what Emma said, that because the biggest thing in coaching is that you need to have, of course, you need to have the freedom for players, you need to understand them, work with them, but also you're a leader, and you're making some logical limits where to move, because it doesn't matter what kind of player you have, but you have to make some certain things that you are logical, you keep up, for example, time-wise, schedule, or some rules between the team that are underneath the values we think, because those are the things. But the beauty of the coaching is that you have different personalities, you have different things, and then it's about the team. And think about between the periods, intermission, you're going to talk with the team, and it's not easy to get, because there's 22 different guys, and maybe they all have different things, but you have to find a way collectively that puts the players you want to be on fire, and things that you want, the players you want to take. That's a big thing, and that makes it ice hockey. I think it's that makes it so interesting.
Okay, perhaps we could ask all the panelists also a little bit to reflect on this poll question, how it resonates with you. So also from your perspective, how do you see, and from your experience, that what are let's say, the question was 3 most important matters for the effective coaching environment. So how would you reflect on this question based on your experience, and a little bit perhaps looking at what the situation now looks to be?
I think it's interesting that winning being the most important value is just 11%. And I think players' feelings to be a part of the group with shared value base, obviously I think that's a strong one, and that's one holding over time in long terms.
I could play a little bit devil's advocate, as I see winning being the most important value as 11%. I could switch that and say winning is the most important thing. It's not winning at all costs. But to win, you need to have very strong values of what we've talked about today, and I'm sure we'll talk about tomorrow. So you could correlate winning to being a good person, being efficient, being effective, being a good teammate. So, you know, if that said winning at all costs, I would put it way down. But winning attitude is what you want. It gives you a lot as a coach. It gives you a lot of green lights, because this is about winning. It's about you winning a spot on this team. It's about you winning a spot on your next team. And it's about you contributing to winning. And to do that, you have to, have strong values, have character, have passion, have commitment. Show us that. So, again, if that said winning at all costs, I'd put it way down.
Yeah, I mean, winning matters. Life is competitive. You compete for jobs, you compete for partners, spouses, grades, you compete for everything in life. So I think we need to be careful sometimes with pushing winning. It's all about development, or we have to choose winning or development. Winning matters. Winning in life matters, and winning attitude, I think, is a nice way to kind of frame that. A lot of the coaches I work with, we talk about competitiveness. So are you in the game? That we can control that. Winning and losing, so many factors, but we can control if we're in the game, our competitiveness, how we approach it, or our training. When I look at this list of items, I think back, I think it was Uffe may have had it up with 3 basic human needs, self-determination theory. And we're need-driven by nature. We do things we feel we need to do. If you're hungry, you go look for food. That's built into us, right? You need a beer, you go look for a beer. But we're driven by needs more than logic or emotion. So there's a lot of research that shows there's 3 basic human needs. One is autonomy. I want to have ownership. I want to have freedom. The second one is relatedness. I want to be connected to other people. We're social by nature. We've evolved in tribes. And the third one is competence. I want to have skills. I want to feel good about myself and be able to do things. So if you're designing environments where you're helping your athletes meet those 3 basic needs of autonomy, relatedness, and competence, you will have them. They will buy in. I hate that term, buy in, but you will meet them where they are in a sense.
Yes.
You mentioned being cautious with winning and putting winning here and development there and so on. So sometimes you hear folks saying that there's the fun and then there's the high performance, and I struggle understanding that why are those two different? How do you see that? I mean, highly competitive environments that you're in, how much emphasis you also put on fun and enjoyment?
Just add real quick and then we'll go down line. When you said the highly competitive environments that we're in, if you're alive, you're in a highly competitive environment. Life is a highly competitive environment. So to me, I have the same feeling.
Yeah, that's a good way, because in the end, the winning is the target in sports. That's the thing. And it's a motivation. It's why we do the work, why do we do the basics. It's that because we want to win and we want to develop the whole thing. It's based on winning, or winning is not even right word, because we all want to win. 2 teams both want to win. But that's a fuel that gives you that you do everyday routines well, you do everyday practicing well, you are in a team group together. And the more the motivation is the same, the more the same target, the more fun it gives, because then you start to live the same life, you have the same vision, you have everything same skill. So I think with the winning team, there's always fun included, because they feel safety in the team, they feel that there's competitive spirit in the team, that it's building, it's firing themselves both up.
Yeah, I kind of think the same way, that it's fun to go to a competitive situation when you know that you are well prepared and you know that you have done everything you can to get there. But so it's not going to be fun if you know that you're not prepared well. So I think they totally go together, and the more you enjoy it, you enjoy getting better. You might not enjoy that horrible practice at that moment, but you enjoy the feeling of getting better, and that's fun. And yeah, you want to win, and you can have a pickup game, but if you're the competitive person, you're still gonna want to win and do your best. So I think they definitely go together.
Yeah, again, and it's a lot about winning, but it's even more about to compete, I think, and then you can say, even after losing a game, you've done the full competition for the team. You can take that with you to the next game, and you got to win game in game coming up. So I think, and from the youth players, almost everyone wants to compete, and the winning with the youngest isn't the most important, but almost all of them want to compete.
There's now a question that's been supported also by some others. So relates to this peer leadership that has been mentioned. That how much do you think that using experienced players, to what has been now described by some of you, helps with the coaching process, and do you need to facilitate that, or does it happen just itself? So how do you see the value of peer leadership?
I think it helps a lot, and Emma talked about when she were an older player on the Finnish team and could get a short review from the coaches in the morning, what's going to happen today, and how do you think, and so on. And then when you present it for the team, you have the leading players already with you.
Yeah, I think it's effective. Like, you're there in the locker room, you're going to be next to your peers on the ice. So I think it's effective for the young player to actually really see what's happening there. And I think the coach can play a role there. He can be setting the groups, and he can be setting roommates in when you're on the road, and there's ways that the coach can facilitate that. So I think it kind of happens both ways, that automatically, and then if the coach sees something that there's a need for that player to be guided more, then it can be facilitated by the coach.
So go back to basic human motivation. Relatedness is one of the 3 basic human needs. Pure influence, every research I've seen, pure influence is much stronger than coach or adult or teacher. So, because again, that's wired into us. We want to be accepted by our peer groups. It's a basic human need. So you have to, the best coaches know that, and they draw on the peer leadership that's in the room, that's in the team. So you shape that, and you create environments for that to be more prominent, because they're going to look to their teammates more. I hate to break it to you, right? They're going to look to their teammates more than you. For guidance in terms of how to act, what the behaviors are, what's acceptable here. So you can tell them all you want, but then they're gonna, when you walk out of the room, they're gonna look at each other and look at the captain or the seniors, and that's how they're gonna act. So peer leadership is a must. That's a given. So you have to use that and shape that.
Great answer, because that's the way it is. All the good coaching staffs, they need a great leaders inside of the locker room. That's the thing, because they keep the standards up, and they keep the everyday high expectations up, and they are real the voice of the team in the end, and they're also the between the coaching staff and the other team. So you need to have the trust of the strong players, and that's why the real peer pressure and everything else comes from the strong players in the end.
Hold on, I'll bring a mic.
A comment and a question specific. Just about competition, just you're talking about biology and our existence here. I like this one is, this sperm, the fact that you're here, I'm here, it's really a race to the egg. So somewhere it is in our DNA to be competitive. Yeah, exactly. You won, and you made it, and you're here because of that. So I think sometimes that's why I took the mic, because you want to take the space, you want to speak up. Just one question for Don. There was an incident of the Colorado, the best player. What is his name? The best player? McKinnon. Yeah, he had a situation with the coach. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I would like just your specific views on that situation and how he reacted, and how would you have reacted as a coach?
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. As Aku mentioned, we actually spoke on that last night at dinner. That came up. It was Nathan McKinnon. He comes back to the bench. There was a couple minutes left in the game. It was a high emotional moment within the game. He apparently didn't like a decision made by the head coach of Colorado, and when he sat in front of him, the camera went on the bench, and they were barking back and forth, and you could tell that it was not a friendly conversation, or there was the player was clearly upset with something from the coach. So that situation is different at each level. If you're in pro hockey, and the camera's on, now you have a secondary situation you're going to have to deal with, which is part of this. the primary situation of just the player and the coach at that point, without a camera on, the player, and I know Jared Bednar, the coach, my guess is he handled it extremely well, knowing him, very, intense and passionate guy, but has a real good head about himself. And so I think him, from a leadership standpoint, realized, that emotion that the player has is not a bad thing. I'm not going to take it personal, even though it's on a TV camera right now, and everybody's going to want me to overreact and bench this guy because he embarrassed me, he upstaged me, he showed me up. So I think that went away really quick, probably because Jared handled it the right way, and Nathan McKinnon. Then I think he even came out publicly and said he shouldn't have done that. So that situation could have lingered on through the rest of the season, and Colorado not made the playoffs. They went on a run to make the playoffs that was unreal. I mean, whatever it was, I wouldn't be surprised if it was winning 14 of their last 15 games. They beat us. We were 1 point behind us. They beat us both nights, Friday night and Saturday night, or Saturday and Sunday in Colorado, back in Chicago, and went 5 points or 4 points up on us. We did get 1 point out of that. But they went from that situation, you're not out of the pressure, and they put that one behind them really quick. So whatever they did, there was a mutual respect of the two, and a real drive to win. And I think that was a strong relationship that was built prior, and doing the right things prior as a coach. And it was to me, at the end of it, it was a moment that happened. It wasn't a lingering thing for 6 months that Nathan McKinnon didn't like his head coach, and it finally boiled over. I think it was just in the moment. He did it, couldn't control his emotions, and they handled it, I think, incredibly well, because it went away. And it's tough for those things to go away when you're in the eye like that and the camera's on you. But I would tell you this, on that bench, that happens a lot more than you think. The camera was on, and the body language was an actual turn. But I can tell you, those players come to the bench and they don't like things. They may not turn, but they're telling you they don't like it. And that confrontation or potential confrontation is there and exists on benches throughout the league every game to a varying degree. The exact same thing that happened there happens game to game. Whether it's taking a guy off the ice too early or putting a guy out, they don't like it. And they want to question you doing it. But I give our guys in Chicago a tremendous amount of respect. I oversaw the D, and Seabrook and Keith. There were a lot of things they didn't like, and they questioned. And I give them a lot of credit and have a lot of respect for how they handled it. Because they could have reacted that way many times in their mind because they didn't agree with what happened. But again, to their credit, they kept playing, and we would discuss it later, or they'd say something immediately. They'd actually turn and say, "Hey, can I talk to you on the bench?" So it's a highly emotional. We all know it, coaching in those situations. That was an unfortunate one that they fixed quick, I thought.
But perhaps just a quick one. Turning this situation upside down, there's a question from the audience that what do you think if it happens the other way around? Coach starts calling player idiots.
Me? I think the coach is an idiot, probably. No, that's why I say with Jared Bednar, I know him enough and have known him long enough. I think he handled it incredibly, and I trust that. When he went in there, he's not worried about the media. He's not worried about what the ownership thinks. He's worried about what the player, and that's why I think he's a heck of a coach. But yeah, I just don't think you should have. You're the one that should be less emotional and not. If you're emotional as a coach, it's because your team needs it at that point, in that moment. If you're emotional and they don't need it, you're out of control. You're not doing what you should be doing.
Okay, Wade has the last word.
No, not
Syndrome.
the last word. I didn't say last word. I said one word. As a general rule of thumb, comment or criticize, if you will, the behavior, not the person. So not you're an idiot, that play was really bad, okay, or that positioning was awful. So make it about the behavior, not the person. And especially with younger athletes, even when you do that, they're still going to just relate it to them. And you'll have to be a little bit more explicit. But be critical of behaviors, not the person.